And welcome back to the Race Weekend. I'm Joe St. George. It's time for our Inside the Race panel with our partners from Politico. My favorite part of the show this week from Politico, we have White House reporter and West Wing Playbook co-author Lauren Egan and national political correspondent Braxton Booker. From Scripps News, we have our political director Andrew Rafferty and political analyst Steve Schmidt. All welcome to the program. How much is President Biden, Lauren, focused on getting solid numbers on Super Tuesday, or you write the West Wing playbook, right? You know what's going on in the West Wing. Is he more focused on delivering a strong State of the Union speech Thursday night?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Obviously, we're all going to be paying attention to what happens on Super Tuesday, but from the White House's perspective, this is really a done deal. The president hasn't had any serious challenger at all during this primary. The only thing we're probably going to be paying attention to is how many uncommitted votes we see on Super Tuesday. We've seen, of course, that happened earlier on in the primary. People that want to protest the president's approach to the conflict between Hamas and Israel have voted uncommitted. So we'll see what happens there. There's been some grassroots efforts in Colorado to get people to vote uncommitted, but it's been a late effort. We're really not expecting that to be a real thorn in the president's side on Super Tuesday. All the focus in the White House right now is on that big speech on Thursday.
And real quick, Lauren, give our viewers some perspective. How long has the president and his team been actually working on this State of the Union address?
I think if you ask them, it's a years-long process, right? Everything that the president does throughout the calendar year, in effect, is part of the State of the Union address. He's going to talk about his accomplishments, but also he's going to talk about what he wants to do should he get a second term, right? So in a way, obviously, this is a big, important, very official White House event, but there's a campaign element to it too, right? We're going to hear what his plans are should he win re-election.
Steve, you provide political analysis here at Scripps News. You've worked in politics a long time. How much does President Biden need to really nail his State of the Union speech on Thursday?
The great deficit that President Biden faces in this election right now is a communications deficit. He has been overwhelmed on the basis of 3 years by Donald Trump, by the MAGA movement. One of the central promises that he made running for president is that he would deal with this American extremism. And the reality is it's bigger, it's hotter than it has been at any time since it sprang to life in 2015. So the president has to lay out to an audience that is skeptical about his abilities to do the job. If the election were tomorrow, Donald Trump would likely win that election. You have 70 to 80% of the country that says we don't like the choice between Trump and Biden. But as we talk about Super Tuesday, that will be the choice Americans have to face. And so the president, who did not choose to appear to a massive American audience on the Super Bowl, will now speak to the largest audience, barring national catastrophe, that he will speak to, uninterrupted, with the floor entirely his, from behind the full majesty of the office before the Congress. This is it, right? There's no other bigger audience, no other bigger opportunity. Most presidents talk for too long at these, for over an hour. It's important to remember the Gettysburg Address was about 6 minutes long. So in the end, how long you communicate is often confused with what you communicate and communicating effectively. And that's really the test for the president as we look to later in this week.
Braxton, you cover the intersection of race and politics at Politico. How much is race going to play a role in Super Tuesday, or more importantly in November? I mean, have we seen some traditionally Democratic voters shift Republican, or is that a narrative that's being a bit overplayed?
Well, look, I think it's actually both, and I think Republicans are making some inroads with particularly black and brown electorates, but it's not going to be this drastic swing. Democrats are not going to lose, say, 50% of the black vote to Republicans. But when what we saw in Michigan, if there is enough uncommitted or those voicing some skepticism about Biden's handling of the presidency, and if they have real questions about whether he has the mental acuity to move forward as president, sure, you might see some folks have a protest vote and go for Donald Trump. I think the more logical reaction from a lot of voters of color who may be, uninterested in a second Biden second Biden presidency, second term, I think you may see them actually stay home. So I think that's the real competition that this administration is fighting against, is the voter apathy among key constituencies of his coalition that he used in 2020 to get himself into the White House in the first place.
Let's go to our Scripps News political director, Andrew Rafferty. Andrew, you're fresh off interviewing Nikki Haley. I need to get you to open up the reporter notebook a bit. What was the mood around her campaign when you interviewed her the last few days? Could we see her call it quits after Tuesday?
It is interesting if you look at sort of the forecasting from the Haley campaign going into states like Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. It's always been, yeah, we have to do well here, but we're looking forward to the next state. And so far, and this could change, honestly, by the time I'm done talking right now, so far we haven't heard a lot about her plans after Super Tuesday. And so there are some sort of tea leaves you can read. She has some sort of infrastructure set up in the state of Georgia, which votes the week after March 5th on March 12th. But it's certainly not enough to make a decision whether or not to continue a campaign. And even if there is a schedule put out, we've seen in the past, Ron DeSantis maybe being the best example of that that doesn't mean that a candidate is in it for the long haul. And so I think what we're seeing and why the kind of messaging from the campaign is the way it is they are legitimately curious and waiting to see what happens on Tuesday night. If there is some sort of metric they're looking for, whether it's at 30 to 40% that she likes to talk about getting in some of these early primary states, whether it's a delegate number, that's not going to come out publicly, but there certainly is some sort of metric that's going to decide whether or not they are going to continue their campaign. But it is a little bit of a difference from what we saw throughout January and most of February, Joe.
Lauren, real quick, Trump legal issues. The Supreme Court will hear arguments in his immunity case, it looks like, into April. Decision could be a few weeks later. How does the Trump campaign feel right now about this? I mean, they may be able to delay, let's say, the January 6th trial until after the election. Really huge news out of the Supreme Court on this week. Yeah,
obviously they're projecting a lot of confidence on this right now, and they feel like the more that they can keep sort of, these legal troubles in the news, but actually delay any real decisions on it, the more that it helps him electorally come November. So they're feeling confident and certainly making that known on social media. And in all of their public statements.
Well, that's all the time we have for now with our Inside the Race panel. Lauren, Braxton, Andrew, and Steve, thank you so much for your insights. And welcome back to the Race Weekend. I'm Joe St. George in Washington. It's time for our Inside the Race panel with our friends, our partners from Politico. This week we have from Politico, White House reporter and West Wing Playbook co-author. If you don't subscribe, Lauren Egan, and national political correspondent Braxton Booker. From Scripps News, we have our political director, Andrew Rafferty, and political analyst Steve Schmidt. All welcome. Braxton, immigration, big race issue. Is there a misconception out there, though, that every Latino, every Hispanic voter out there wants a more open system? Because, if you go to a Trump rally, really anywhere, I have found Hispanics, Latinos who actually want some tougher border rules.
No, and I think that's absolutely right. I think this characterization that certainly that the Republicans are laying around President Biden, that he is for open borders, and this is why we're seeing kind of this impeachment process move against HHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, is that a lot of Latinos feel like, yes, there should be a strong immigration system. There should be some system in place and not this what we see a lot of on conservative media, just like these troves of people coming across the border unabated, right? So I think it is a misconception that Latinos only care about immigration issues. Certainly they care about the economy, and I think that's what you see kind of across the board. But immigration played a big role in the presidential process this week, with both Biden and Trump being at the border. And what I think you're seeing actually play out is how this is impacting, say, mayors of blue cities, that we're seeing immigrants that are coming into the country legally being sent to places like Chicago, places like New York, and that is impacting how certainly liberal cities are dealing with the issue. And then you have folks that are looking at the Biden administration, including the mayors of these big cities, saying, like, why isn't the federal government helping us, these big liberal enclaves? So I think this is certainly, we're going to look forward to President Biden giving some clarity about what he wants on these border issues in the State of the Union address. But you will see immigration be an issue moving forward all the way through the general election.
Lauren, I'm curious about White House strategy here, because the White House is very eager to say, well, the president is considering executive action. But then at least Scripps News reporting, I'm sure your reporting suggests something similar, that, oh, it may not happen, anytime soon. I mean, walk us through why the president can't just issue something yesterday. I mean, the border has been an issue for years.
Yeah, look, there's always issues with executive action when it comes to something like the border. It's a lot more complicated than it sounds. Certainly, if he were to do that, let's say today, there would be legal challenges that he would face. And I think in the context of an election year, the White House and the Biden campaign, are certainly aware that this is a political issue for the president. And as Braxton spoke to, this is even a problem within his own party. When you have mayors of places like Denver, Colorado, giving the White House a bit of a hard time publicly about the lack of support that they feel like they have on this issue. So what we saw yesterday with President Biden's trip to the border, of course, that was a dual competing visit. President Trump was also down there as well. The White House is really trying to pin this back on Republicans and say, look, we championed this bipartisan border agreement in the Senate, and it was Trump and House Republicans that really messed this whole thing up. They want to make this a vulnerability for Republicans, not Democrats. Of course, that's going to be a challenge that they're going to have to take on over these next couple months.
Steve, if border security is the #1 issue on voters' minds in November, and we're a ways away from there, but don't you think that means former President Trump is going to be current President Trump again?
It certainly provides him an enormous advantage. If immigration policy is the #1 issue in the country, it will be impossible for Democrats to make the case that they are the tough on immigration party, and no amount of scapegoating, blame casting, pointing the finger at Republicans, no matter how meritorious it may be, is going to work. The fact of the matter is that during COVID, immigration flow along that southern border slowed to almost zero. And Donald Trump took credit for that. Plus all of the inflammatory rhetoric, plus all of the demagogic broadcasts over far-right television. Now, over these last years, you've had a net millions of people entering the country illegally. Politicians have a well-honed instinct for self-preservation. So if it's the Democratic mayor of Denver, of New York City, of Los Angeles, of San Francisco, these mayors, these communities all across the country that are affected by this total breakdown are crying out for help. And so this is a slow-moving Katrina for the Biden White House. The problem for Bush in Katrina was the images showed chaos and disaster, while the administration said, we got this. And the Biden administration is saying another version of, we got this, while daily across the country, the impact of this plays out in a way that people feel, that they see, and brings great cynicism towards the people who are telling them everything is okay. This is a big problem for President Biden in this election.
A slow-moving Katrina, you say. Wow, strong words there. Andrew, real quick, is the border an issue everywhere? It obviously is in a swing state like Arizona, but Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, I mean, they're closer to the northern border than the Yuma sector in Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think for all the reasons that this panel has laid out, part of it is the rhetoric from the top leading candidates, specifically Donald Trump. Part of it is the media, but also there was a point in time when immigration was not a particularly partisan issue where Democrats and Republicans viewed it similarly as an economic issue. Either people are coming in to take American jobs or providing workers for industries that featured a labor shortage. Now it is a lot more about the culture of America. It is about violence. It is about crime. And that is why it is really a top issue for, I was just in South Carolina, not near any border. And it was really a top issue of every Republican voter that I spoke to who voted in that primary just a week ago, Joe.
Well, that's all the time we have for now. Smart conversation per usual. All Lauren, Braxton, Andrew, and Steve, thank you so much for your time and for the insight.
Thank you for listening to my political commentary. If you like what you heard today, please also consider subscribing to The Warning daily newsletter on Substack.